Admiral Kim Tae-hyung had not slept in 3 days. The emergency meeting room at Earth Defense Command was filled with smoke from too many cigarettes and the smell of fear. Reports kept flooding in from humanity's outer colonies, and none of them were good. "Show me the Kepler station footage again," he ordered, rubbing his tired eyes. The hologram in the center of the room flickered to life, showing humanity's farthest mining station. What they saw made everyone in the room go quiet. 3 massive HFY bioships had arrived at the asteroid belt, where humans had been mining precious metals. The alien vessels were feeding on the asteroids like cosmic whales, their tentacle arms pulling chunks of rock into glowing stomach chambers. "How long ago was this?" asked Colonel Bae Soo-hyun, the commander of Earth's Special Forces. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and scars on her hands from years of combat training. 6 hours, replied the communications officer. The Soul's Pride arrived just as the attack began. On the screen, they watched Captain Lee Min-ho's ship drop out of faster-than-light travel and immediately find itself in hell. The 3 HFY vessels turned toward the human ship like predators sensing new prey. What happened next was humanity's first real battle with the galaxy's apex predators. "Our weapons are useless," Engineer Choi Yuna reported from the Soul's Pride. Her voice came through the speakers with static and the sound of explosions in the background. "Kinetic rounds just bounce off their hulls. It's like shooting at a mountain." The human ship fired everything it had: missiles, energy beams, even their experimental plasma cannon. The weapons hit the nearest HFY vessel and simply disappeared, absorbed by the living metal of its hull. In response, the alien ship fired back with a weapon that looked like liquid lightning. "Hull breach on Deck 7, came Jang Ki-won's voice. "Whatever that thing fired, it's eating through our armor like acid." Admiral Kim Tae-hyung watched his people fight and die on the screen. The human ship was fast and its crew was brave, but they were like a mouse trying to fight 3 elephants. The HFY bioships were too big, too strong, and too alien for conventional weapons to work. "Sir," called Dr. Park Hana from the Soul's Pride, "I'm picking up something strange." When we flew past the mining station's electromagnetic field generators, the nearest HFY ship pulled back. It actually moved away from us. Electromagnetic fields. Colonel Bae Soo-hyun leaned forward. "Why would that matter?" "I don't know," Park Hana replied, "but it's the only thing that's made them react defensively." On the screen, they watched Captain Lee Min-ho make a desperate decision. Instead of continuing to fight, he ordered his ship to retreat through the mining station's asteroid field. As they passed close to the giant electromagnetic machines that humans use to sort metals, something amazing happened. The HFY ship stopped following them. "They won't enter the electromagnetic field," Engineer Choi Yuna reported with excitement. "Whatever these things are made of, strong magnetic fields hurt them somehow." But the humans' victory was short-lived. The HFY had sent ground forces to the mining station itself. Colonel Bae Soo-hyun watched through security cameras as spider-like creatures the size of cars crawled through the station's corridors. They had crystal shells that sparkled with their own light and moved on 6 legs that ended in cutting tools. "We have survivors trapped in the station," Lee Min-ho reported. "I'm reading 43 human life signs, but those things are hunting them down one by one." "I'm going in," Colonel Bae Soo-hyun announced, standing up from the conference table. "With what?" Admiral Kim Tae-hyung asked. "We don't have any ships that can get there in time." "The experimental transport," Bae Soo-hyun replied. "It's fast enough and I'll take my best people." 2 hours later, Colonel Bae Soo-hyun and her Special Forces team materialized inside Kepler Station using humanity's newest teleportation technology. What they found was a nightmare of torn metal and strange alien sounds echoing through the corridors. "Remember?" she whispered into her radio. "The electromagnetic pulse grenades are our best bet. These things might be tough, but if they're anything like their ships, electricity should hurt them." Her team moved through the station like ghosts, using every trick they had learned in decades of training. The HFY ground forces were dangerous, but they moved in predictable patterns. They seemed to share the same hive mind as their ships, which meant they all thought the same way. Humans, however, did not think the same way at all. "Contact," whispered Sergeant Lee Dong-hyuk as they rounded a corner. A HFY warrior stood in the middle of the corridor, its crystal shell reflecting the emergency lights. It was feeding on something that had once been human, its cutting tools working with horrible efficiency. Bae Soo-hyun signaled her team to spread out. In a normal fight, they would have attacked together from the front. Instead, she had them move in completely different directions, attacking from angles that made no sense strategically. The alien creature spun around, confused. Its shared mind was trying to process why these small beings were not acting like a coordinated group. While it hesitated, trying to decide which threat to face first, Sergeant Lee Donghyuk threw an EMP grenade. The electromagnetic pulse hit the HFY warrior like a lightning bolt. Its crystal shell cracked, its glowing veins went dark, and it collapsed to the floor with a sound like breaking glass. "It works," Bae Soo-hyun breathed. "The EMP actually works." They moved through the station, saving survivors and learning more about their enemies with every battle. The HFY were individually powerful, but they were not used to fighting opponents who could think independently. Every time the humans split up and attacked from different directions at once, the aliens seemed to freeze for a moment, as if their shared brain could not process multiple unexpected actions. "They're like a computer trying to run too many programs," observed engineer Choi Yuna, who had joined the rescue mission. "Their hive mind can handle predictable threats, but chaos confuses them." Meanwhile, in space, pilot Jang Ki-won was learning the same lesson. His fighter squadron had been called in to provide cover for the rescue mission. The HFY had sent smaller ships to hunt them down, but Jang Ki-won had an idea. "All pilots," he called over the radio. "Forget formation flying. Forget coordination. Everyone pick a different target and attack however you want. Make it impossible for them to predict what we're doing." The human fighters spread out and began attacking the alien ships in the most chaotic way possible. One pilot flew straight up, another dove down. A third spun in circles while firing. To any human observer, it would have looked like madness. To the HFY, it was impossible to counter. Their bioships, designed to fight against organized fleets with predictable tactics, could not adapt fast enough to handle 12 different pilots all doing completely different things. For the first time in thousands of years, HFY vessels found themselves outmaneuvered by smaller, weaker opponents. "We're actually winning," Jang Ki-won reported with amazement as his plasma cannon punched through the hull of an alien fighter. "They can't figure out what we're doing." The rescue mission was successful. Colonel Bae Soo-hyun's team saved 37 survivors and gathered invaluable intelligence about HFY technology. As they retreated from the ruined mining station, they carried with them the knowledge that humanity had found weaknesses in the galaxy's greatest predators, but they also carried something else, the certainty that the HFY would not ignore humanity much longer. "They'll be back," Dr. Park Hana warned as the Soul's Pride jumped back toward Earth. "And next time, they'll bring more ships." Admiral Kim Tae-hyung nodded grimly as he watched the after-action reports. Humanity had won their first battle against the HFY, but it had been close. Too close. They needed better weapons, better tactics, and most importantly, they needed to prepare for a war unlike anything they had ever imagined. In the depths of space, the HFY War Prime Vextharian received the reports from Kepler Station. For the first time in his 3,000-year existence, he felt something he did not understand. The humans had behaved in ways that defied all logic, all prediction, all understanding. They were chaos given form. And chaos was the one thing the perfect order of the HFY could not consume. The hunt for humanity was no longer just about adding another species to their collection. It had become personal. War Prime Vextharian had lived for 3,000 years, and in all that time he had never felt what humans called anticipation. The HFY did not experience emotions the way other species did. They felt only the satisfaction of successful hunts and the drive to consume and grow stronger. But as his massive fleet approached the human solar system, something new stirred in his ancient mind. Curiosity. The devourer of worlds was larger than most moons. Its biomechanical hull stretched across 50 kilometers of space. Behind it came 12 smaller hive ships, each one capable of destroying entire planets. This was the largest HFY force ever assembled for a single world. And Vextharian had brought it to face one small blue planet and its stubborn inhabitants. "Scan the system," he commanded in the clicking, hissing language of his people. "Show me what these humans have prepared." The response from his sensor creatures made him pause. The solar system was not what he expected. "War Prime," his navigation beast reported. "The asteroid belt has been modified. There are artificial objects hidden among the rocks. Thousands of them." Vextharian studied the readings more carefully. The humans had turned their entire asteroid belt into a minefield. but not with normal explosives. Each hidden device gave off the electromagnetic signature that his ships found so painful. Clever, he admitted, but not clever enough. His fleet was still approaching Mars when the first trap was sprung. What looked like an ordinary asteroid suddenly activated, sending out a massive electromagnetic pulse. The blast was not strong enough to seriously damage his ships, but it was painful, like being struck by lightning. Then another asteroid activated. Then another. Within minutes, the entire asteroid belt was alive with electromagnetic mines all firing at once. Shields to maximum, Vextharian ordered, but he was already impressed despite himself. No other species had ever thought to turn an entire stellar region into a weapon. That was when the human ships attacked. They came from everywhere at once. Some burst out of hiding places behind moons. Others emerged from the shadow of gas giants, and a few seemed to appear from nowhere at all. But what surprised Vextharian most was how they moved. There was no formation, no coordination, no plan that he could detect. Each human ship moved independently, as if its crew was making up their attack strategy as they went along. It was chaos in its purest form, and chaos was the one thing the ordered minds of the Kethvar could not easily counter. Analysis, he demanded. Unknown, Warprime, his tactical creature replied, confusion evident in its biomechanical voice. They appear to be attacking randomly. No pattern detected. No central command structure identified. Vextharian watched as human ships swarmed around his fleet like angry insects. Their weapons were still weak compared to Kethvar biocannons, but they were using those weapons in ways that defied all logic. Some ships fired continuously while flying in spirals. Others attacked in short bursts while constantly changing direction, and a few were actually ramming his smaller vessels with their hulls. They fight like berserkers, he observed, but berserkers with intelligence. The battle quickly spread throughout the solar system. Human ships used every planet, moon, and asteroid as cover, turning the fight into a three-dimensional maze of ambushes and surprise attacks. Admiral Kang Jiung coordinated the defense from her command post on Earth, but she was not really controlling her fleet in any traditional sense. All ships, continue independent operations, she broadcast. Remember, unpredictability is our greatest weapon. Make them guess what you're going to do next, then do something completely different. Captain Lee Minho, now commanding a new ship called the Incheon's Fury, took this advice to heart. His vessel was one of the smaller human ships, fast and agile but not heavily armed. Against a normal enemy, it would have been almost useless. Against the Kethvar, it became a nightmare. Target the big one, he told his crew, pointing at Vextharian's flagship. We're going to fly straight at it, then at the last second we're going to do something they'll never expect. What's that, sir? Asked his weapons officer. I have no idea, Lee Minho replied with a grin. That's what will make it unpredictable. His ship dove toward the devourer of worlds like a missile, drawing fire from dozens of biocannons. At the last possible moment when collision seemed certain, Lee Minho ordered his crew to do something that violated every rule of space combat. They stopped. The Incheon's Fury killed its engines and simply hung in space, letting momentum carry it forward. The Kethvar biocannons, programmed to lead moving targets, fired where the ship should have been and missed completely. In the few seconds of confusion that followed, the human ship fired every weapon it had directly into the flagship's hull at point-blank range. The damage was minor, but the psychological effect was devastating. Vextharian felt something he had not experienced in millennia. Surprise. How did they predict our targeting systems? He demanded. They did not predict Warprime, his sensor beast replied. They did something that makes no logical sense. Our systems could not calculate a response because there was no logic to calculate. Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, Master Sergeant Lee Dong-hyuk was preparing for the ground battle he knew was coming. The Kethvar always sent landing forces to finish off their prey, and Earth's cities were ready for them. But humanity's ground defense was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of building fortified positions and defensive lines, humans had turned their cities into deadly mazes. Every building was a potential ambush point. Every street corner hid surprises, and every underground tunnel led to a different trap. Remember, Lee Dong-hyuk told his soldiers, they think like a hive mind. They expect us to defend logically with organized retreats and predictable tactics. So we're going to do the opposite. We're going to defend chaotically. When the first Kethvar drop pods landed in downtown Seoul, they found a city that seemed empty. The spider-like alien warriors spread out in perfect formation, searching for human defenders according to their programmed patterns. They found them in the most unexpected places. Humans attacked from sewers, from building tops, from inside garbage trucks, and from underground parking garages. They used weapons that ranged from advanced electromagnetic rifles to simple explosives hidden in street food carts. Some soldiers fought in organized squads, others fought alone, and a few seemed to be making up their tactics on the spot. The HFY warriors, designed to fight against organized armies, found themselves completely overwhelmed by urban chaos. Their hive mind could not process thousands of individual humans all fighting in different ways at the same time. But the most devastating human weapon was still Dr. Yoon Seulgi's biological warfare project. She had spent months developing viruses that specifically targeted the organic components of HFY biotechnology. When deployed in Earth's atmosphere, these viruses began eating away at the aliens' living ships. "It's working," she reported from her laboratory bunker. "Their hulls are losing structural integrity. The bioviruses are spreading through their entire fleet." Vextharian watched in growing alarm as his ships began to weaken and die. The humans had found a way to turn his greatest strength against him. The HFY's biomechanical nature, which made them nearly indestructible against conventional weapons, made them vulnerable to biological attacks. "War Prime," his medical creature reported. "The infection is spreading. We must retreat to avoid total fleet contamination." For the first time in his existence, Vextharian considered the unthinkable. Retreat. But before he could give the order, something happened that changed everything. Captain Lee Minho's ship, battered and nearly destroyed, made one final desperate attack. Instead of targeting the flagship's weapons or engines, he aimed for something no enemy had ever attacked before: Vextharian's personal chambers. The Inchin's fury crashed through the devourer of worlds' hull and came to rest in the War Prime's throne room. As emergency systems sealed the breach, Lee Minho and his surviving crew found themselves face to face with the galaxy's most feared predator. Vextharian was 3 meters tall, with forearms that ended in cutting tools and eyes that glowed with their own light. His body was a mixture of organic tissue and mechanical implants, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "You have fought well, small creature," he said in perfect human English. "But your struggle ends now." Lee Minho looked at the alien monster and did something that surprised them both. He smiled. "You know what the difference is between you and us?" he asked. "Speak," Vextharian commanded. "You fight to consume," Lee Minho replied. "We fight to protect, and when humans fight to protect something they love, we don't know how to lose." He pressed a button on his belt, and the Inchin's fury exploded. The blast did not kill Vextharian, but it wounded him for the first time in centuries. As he lay among the wreckage of his throne room, bleeding biomechanical fluid, he finally understood what made humans so dangerous. They were not just chaotic. They were passionate, and passion was something the cold logic of the HFY could never truly comprehend or defeat. The siege of Earth had become a stalemate, but for the first time in galactic history, the HFY had been stopped. The galaxy's apex predators had met their match in a species that refused to behave like prey. The stars screamed as the Velthari homeworld died. Captain Lee Minho stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, watching his instruments pick up the horrible sounds coming from space. His ship was humanity's first real attempt at exploring beyond Earth's solar system. They had been traveling for 3 months, hoping to find new worlds and maybe other life forms. What they found instead was a nightmare. "Captain, you need to hear this," Dr. Parkhana called from her station. She was the ship's expert on alien languages, though until today they had never found any aliens to talk to. Her face was pale as she adjusted her headset. "I'm picking up transmissions from the planet ahead. They're calling for help." Minho moved to her station. Through the ship's windows, he could see a blue-green world that should have been beautiful. Instead, massive black shapes moved around it like hungry sharks. The shapes were wrong somehow, as if someone had mixed machines with living creatures and created something that should not exist. "What are they saying?" Minho asked. Parkhana's hands shook as she worked her translation computer. "They're saying the devourers have come and nowhere to run, and..." She stopped, her face going even whiter. "They're saying goodbye to their children." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Through the static of space, they could hear voices speaking in a language they had never heard before. The voices sounded afraid, desperate, and utterly alone. "Sir?" called Engineer Choi Yuna from the back of the bridge. "Those black shapes around the planet, they're not natural. They're ships, really, really big ships." Minho grabbed his binoculars and looked more closely at the alien world. What he had thought were storm clouds were actually enormous vessels. Each one was the size of a small moon, with surfaces that seemed to move and breathe. They had tentacle-like arms that reached down to the planet's surface, pulling up huge chunks of land and feeding them into glowing mouths. "They're eating the planet," whispered pilot Jang Ki-won, who had joined them at the window. "They're actually eating it." As they watched, smaller ships broke away from the large ones. These looked like giant insects mixed with submarines, covered in what appeared to be both metal armor and living skin. They moved in perfect formation like parts of a single mind controlling them all. "Captain," Park Hana said, her voice barely controlled, "I'm getting clearer signals now. The beings down there, they call themselves the Velthari. They're a peaceful people. They've never hurt anyone. And those things attacking them..." She paused to listen more carefully. "They call them the Kethvar. According to these transmissions, the Kethvar have been destroying worlds for thousands of years." "Why?" Minho asked. "What do they want?" "Everything," Park Hana replied. "They take the metals from the planets, the genetic material from the people, even the water and air. They consume entire civilizations and use what they take to make themselves stronger." On the planet below, they could see explosions of light as the Velthari tried to fight back. But their weapons seemed to do nothing against the massive alien ships. The Kethvar vessels just absorbed the attacks and continued their terrible feast. "Sir, we're receiving a direct transmission," Park Hana announced. "It's aimed at us." "Put it through," Minho ordered, though every instinct told him they should run. The voice that came through their speakers was not Velthari. It was deeper, colder, and somehow made them all feel sick just hearing it. Park Hana worked frantically to translate as the alien words filled their bridge. It says, "New prey detected. Small ship. Unknown species. You will be analyzed. You will be consumed. Resistance is meaningless, and that's it," Minho declared. "We're leaving. Now." But as Jang Ki-won fired up the engines, something appeared on their screens that made them all freeze. One of the smaller Kethvar ships had separated from the others and was moving toward them. It was still far away, but it was coming fast. "How fast can those things move?" Minho asked. "According to the Velthari transmissions," Park Hana said, reading from her screen, "faster than anything they ever built." "Captain, if that thing catches it won't," Minho said firmly. "Jang Ki-won, get us out of here. Maximum speed." As the Soul's Pride turned away from the dying world, they got their first close look at a Kethvar scout ship. It was about the size of a football stadium, shaped like a twisted combination of a spider and a shark. Its hull seemed to be made of black metal that moved like living tissue. Glowing veins pulsed along its sides, and its front end had what could only be described as a mouth filled with rotating teeth made of crystal. "It's gaining on us," Jang Ki-won reported, his voice tight with concentration. "Impossible," Choi Yuna said. "Our engines are the fastest things humans have ever built." But the alien ship was indeed getting closer. As it did, they could see more details that made their situation even more terrifying. The ship's surface was covered in smaller creatures that looked like metal crabs. These seemed to be working on the ship's hull, constantly repairing and improving it while it flew. "It's alive," Dr. Park Hana breathed. "The ship itself is alive." "Sir," Jang Ki-won called, "it's trying to lock onto us with some kind of tractor beam. I can feel it pulling at our ship." Minho made a decision that would change everything for humanity. Instead of continuing to run in a straight line, he ordered Jang Ki-won to do something the Kethvar had probably never seen before. "Random pattern evasion," he commanded. "Don't follow any plan. Just move however feels right." Jang Ki-won nodded and began flying their ship in a completely unpredictable way. He spun left, then right, then up, then down, with no pattern at all. To their amazement, the Kethvar ship seemed confused by this. Its pursuit became less direct, as if it was having trouble predicting where they would go next. "It's working," Choi Yuna said with wonder. "They can't figure out what we're doing." "Because they think like a hive," Park Hana realized. "They all share the same mind, so they expect everyone else to think logically too. But humans, we're chaotic. They managed to escape, but not before their sensors recorded everything about the Kethvar ship. As they jumped back toward Earth, carrying the terrible news of what they had witnessed, none of them knew that they had just shown the galaxy's greatest predators something they had never seen before. Truly unpredictable behavior. Behind them, the Velthari homeworld continued to die, but the Kethvar scout ship was sending a different kind of message back to its masters. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Kethvar had encountered a species that did not behave as expected. The hunt for humanity was about to begin. Earth had become a fortress world in the space of 6 months. Every major city now had massive electromagnetic shield generators that hummed day and night. Engineer Choi Yuna worked 18-hour days in the weapons development labs, her eyes red from staring at computer screens and her hands stained with grease from prototype machines. The electromagnetic disruption cannon is ready for testing, she announced to the assembled military leaders. Her voice was hoarse from exhaustion, but her eyes still burned with determination. If my calculations are correct, this should be able to punch through their bioship hulls. General Nam Wubin studied the weapon plans on his tablet. He was a quiet man who had spent his entire career thinking about how to win impossible battles. Now he faced the most impossible battle of all, defending humanity against creatures that had conquered the galaxy. "What makes you think this will work when our other weapons failed?" he asked. "Because we're not trying to destroy them with brute force anymore," Choi Yuna explained. "The Kethvar bioships are living machines. They have nervous systems, blood vessels, even something like a brain. The EDC sends out electromagnetic pulses that interfere with all of that. It's like giving them a massive stroke." Across the room, Commander Ojisu was studying reports from human intelligence networks. She had been a spy before the Kethvar arrived, but now her job was to figure out how aliens thought. What she had discovered was both terrifying and encouraging. "The Kethvar are getting frustrated," she reported. "Our monitoring stations have intercepted their communications. They're having trouble understanding why we don't behave like other species they've conquered." "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Shin Hyunwoo, the physicist who had been studying the strange quantum effects that seemed to happen around human consciousness. "Every other species they've fought has had predictable leaders, organized armies, and logical strategies," Ojisu explained. "But humans, we have millions of different ways of thinking. Every human commander makes different decisions, even in the same situation. Their hive mind can't process that level of chaos." Dr. Shin Hyunwoo nodded thoughtfully. His recent experiments had shown something incredible. Human brains operated on quantum frequencies that actually interfered with Kethvar communication systems. When enough humans concentrated together, they created what he called thought static that could disrupt alien coordination. "I think I can weaponize this effect," he announced. "If we train people to focus their thoughts in specific ways, we might be able to jam their hive mind communications completely." General Nam Wubin looked up from his battle plans. For the first time in months, he was smiling. "Are you telling me that human stubbornness is actually a weapon?" "The best weapon we have," Dr. Shin Hyunwoo confirmed. The first test of humanity's new understanding came when a Kethvar scouting force entered the outer solar system. 3 bioships, each the size of a mountain, approached Mars where humans had established their furthest defensive line. Admiral Kang Ji-young commanded the defense fleet from her flagship, the Busan's Hammer. She was a veteran of humanity's early space wars, but nothing had prepared her for fighting living ships that could think and adapt. "Remember the plan," she announced to her fleet. "No formation flying. No coordinated attacks. Every ship picks its own target and its own method. Make it impossible for them to predict what we're doing." The human fleet split apart like a school of fish, each ship moving in a completely different direction. Some flew straight at the enemy, others approached from the sides, and a few even came from behind after taking the long way around Mars. To the Kethvar, this looked like madness. Their hive mind tried to analyze the human attack pattern and found nothing. There was no pattern. Each human ship was making its own decisions based on the individual thinking of its crew. "Now," Admiral Kang Ji-young ordered, "fire the EDC." Engineer Choi Yuna's electromagnetic disruption cannon had been mounted on the Busan's Hammer. When it fired, it sent out a focused pulse of electromagnetic energy that hit the nearest Kethvar bioship like an invisible fist. The results were immediate and devastating. The alien vessel's living hull began to spasm and twist. Its glowing veins flickered and went dark. The tentacle arms that it used to feed went limp, and the ship began to drift helplessly through space. "It's working," Choyuna shouted with joy. "The EDC is actually working." But the Kethvar adapted quickly. The other two bioships moved to protect their damaged companion, and their hulls began to change. Crystalline growths appeared on their surfaces, deflecting some of the electromagnetic energy. "They're learning," Admiral Kang Ji-young observed grimly. "We need to hit them before they can adapt completely." That was when Dr. Shin Hyun-woo's thought static weapon got its first real test. On every human ship, specially trained crew members began focusing their thoughts in specific patterns. They thought about chaos, about randomness, about all the unpredictable things that made humans human. The effect was immediate. The Kethvar ships suddenly lost coordination. They stopped moving in perfect formation and began flying erratically, as if their pilots were drunk. The alien vessels collided with each other. Their weapons fired in random directions, and their communication systems filled with electronic noise. "Their hive mind is breaking down," Dr. Shin Hyun-woo reported from his monitoring station. "They can't think clearly when we're projecting quantum chaos at them." The battle turned into a rout. Human ships, no longer facing coordinated opposition, tore apart the confused Kethvar vessels with conventional weapons. Within an hour, all three alien bioships were either destroyed or disabled. But victory came with a terrible price. As the human fleet celebrated their first major victory, long-range sensors detected something that made everyone fall silent. A massive fleet of Kethvar ships was approaching the solar system. At its center was a bioship so large that it had its own gravity field, pulling asteroids and debris into orbit around it. "That's the Devourer of Worlds," Dr. Parkana announced, her voice barely a whisper. "It's War Prime Vexitharian's flagship. He's coming here personally." The celebration on the human ships died instantly. Intelligence reports said that Vexitharian had never been defeated in battle. He had personally overseen the destruction of hundreds of worlds and the extinction of dozens of species. Now he was coming to Earth, and he was bringing the largest Kethvar fleet ever assembled. General Nam Wubin studied the sensor readings and began to smile again. His staff looked at him as if he had gone crazy. "Sir," one of his aides asked carefully, "are you all right?" "I'm perfect," Nam Wubin replied. "Don't you see? This is exactly what we wanted. We wanted the galaxy's most dangerous predator to come here with enough ships to destroy our entire solar system," Admiral Kang Ji-young asked. "Yes," Nam Wubin said simply. "Because now we get to show him what humans do when we're cornered. We don't just fight back. We get creative." Over the next few weeks, as the Kethvar fleet approached Earth, humanity prepared the most audacious defense in the history of warfare. They turned the entire solar system into a trap, using every dirty trick, every insane idea, and every bit of human stubbornness they could muster. When War Prime Vexitharian arrived at Earth, he expected to find a terrified species begging for mercy, like all the others he had conquered. Instead, he found something that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his very long life. He found humans who were not just ready to fight, but eager to show the galaxy's apex predator that there were worse things in the universe than Kethvar. There were angry humans who had something to protect. Commander, Jisu's intelligence reports had been correct. The Kethvar were frustrated because they could not understand human behavior, but what they did not realize was that confusion worked both ways. Humans did not understand the Kethvar either, and humans had a saying about things they did not understand. If you cannot figure out how something works, hit it with a bigger hammer until it breaks. War Prime Vexitharian was about to learn what happened when an entire species decided to use the biggest hammer they could find. The siege of Earth was about to begin, and for the first time in 3,000 years, the outcome was not certain. War Prime Vexitharian retreated to lick his wounds and plan a War Prime Vexitharian's wounds were healing, but something else was broken inside him that would never fully repair. For the first time in 3,000 years, he had been forced to retreat. The taste of defeat was bitter and strange, like poison in his biomechanical systems. His flagship limped through the dark spaces between stars, followed by what remained of his once mighty fleet. 7 of his 12 hive ships had been destroyed or too damaged to fight. The others were infected with human bioviruses that ate away at their living hulls like a slow disease. "War Prime," his communication beast reported, "we are receiving signals from the Kethvar High Command. They demand explanations for our failure." Vexitharian did not respond immediately. How could he explain to his superiors that a single world of chaotic primitives had accomplished what no species had managed in millennia? How could he tell them that the humans fought with a passion that turned their weakness into strength? Tell them the humans are different, he finally said. They do not behave as other prey species. They require special study. But even as he spoke those words, new reports were flooding in from across HFY territory. The humans were not content to simply defend their home world. They were attacking. Fleet Admiral Park Jin-woo stood on the bridge of humanity's newest flagship, the Gwangju's Vengeance, and studied the tactical displays showing HFY positions throughout the galaxy. Earth's defense had been just the beginning. Now it was time to show the galaxy's predators what it felt like to be hunted. Operation Apex Hunt is now active, he announced to his assembled fleet commanders. We have 43 human battle groups spread across HFY territory. Our mission is simple: make them afraid to leave their home. Systems. The human fleet had grown enormously in the months since the siege of Earth. Refugee species from across the galaxy had provided intelligence, resources, and even volunteers to help fight the HFY. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's scattered civilizations had hope. Captain An Mi-young commanded one of the most dangerous missions in Operation Apex Hunt. Her ship, the Daegu's Shadow, was specifically designed for boarding actions against HFY vessels. Unlike other species that had tried to fight the aliens in space, humans had developed tactics for capturing enemy ships intact. Remember, she told her boarding team as they approached a HFY supply vessel. These ships are alive. Treat them like dangerous animals, not machines, and whatever you do, don't let them call for help. The boarding action was swift and brutal. Human soldiers, equipped with electromagnetic weapons and biovirus grenades, swarmed through the alien ship's corridors. The HFY crew, used to fighting against organized opposition, could not cope with the chaotic violence of human close combat tactics. Within an hour, the supply ship was in human hands. But more importantly, Captain An Mi-young's team had captured something invaluable: living HFY technology. Scientist Lim Sung-min was waiting when the captured ship arrived at the secret human research facility hidden in the Kuiper Belt. He was a quiet man who had spent his life studying alien technology, but the HFY bioships were unlike anything he had ever encountered. It's incredible, he reported to Fleet Admiral Park Jin-woo after his initial examination. Their ships are not just alive, they're intelligent. Each vessel has its own primitive consciousness, like a trained animal. But that consciousness is connected to the hive mind, which means they can't think independently, Park Jin-woo finished. They're intelligent slaves, exactly. And slaves can be reprogrammed. Over the following weeks, Lim Sung-min and his team performed what could only be described as surgery on the captured HFY ship. They carefully severed its connection to the hive mind and began teaching it to think for itself. The process was delicate and dangerous, but the results were revolutionary. We now have a HFY bioship that thinks like a human, Lim Sung-min announced. It's chaotic, unpredictable, and absolutely terrifying to other HFY vessels. The first field test of their converted ship came during an attack on a HFY mining colony. The alien defenders expected to face human vessels with their familiar electromagnetic weapons. Instead, they found themselves fighting what appeared to be one of their own ships, but one that moved and fought with human unpredictability. The converted bioship tore through the HFY defense fleet like a nightmare made real. Its living weapons, designed by HFY engineers but controlled by human tactical thinking, were devastatingly effective against its former allies. It's like watching a trained dog turn on its pack, observed Captain An Mi-young as she watched the battle from her command ship. They don't know how to fight against their own technology when it's being used creatively. But the most important development in humanity's war against the HFY came from an unexpected source. Dr. Kim Na-yeon, a specialist in alien psychology, had been studying the communication patterns of captured HFY prisoners. What she discovered changed everything. The hive mind is not as unified as we thought, she reported to the Human War Council. There are different factions within HFY society, different ways of thinking about their role in the galaxy. Some of them are starting to question whether endless consumption is really the best path forward. Are you saying we can turn them against each other? Asked General Nam Woo-bin. I'm saying we already are, Dr. Kim Na-yeon replied. Every time we capture one of their ships, Every time we show them that their technology can be used for creation instead of destruction, we're proving that there are alternatives to their way of life. The proof of her theory came when the first HFY defector arrived at a human outpost. The alien, calling itself Freethinker Zakthul, had somehow broken free of the hive mind and was seeking asylum with the humans. "I have seen what you do with our bioships," it said through a translation device, its voice filled with wonder. "You make them live instead of just exist. You give them purpose beyond hunger. This is beautiful." Freethinker Zakthul provided intelligence that allowed human forces to strike directly at HFY command centers. But more importantly, it proved that the alien empire was not as monolithic as it appeared. There were HFY who wanted something more than endless conquest, and humans were showing them that such a life was possible. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, species that had hidden from the HFY for centuries began emerging from their shelters. They brought with them ancient knowledge, advanced technologies, and most importantly, the desperate courage of beings who had nothing left to lose. The Velthari, whose homeworld had been destroyed in the story's opening, provided biological expertise that enhanced human biovirus weapons. The crystalline Silani shared their mastery of electromagnetic fields, making human shields nearly impenetrable. The gaseous Morden offered their ability to hide in plain sight, allowing human ships to approach HFY positions undetected. "For the first time in millennia," reported Commander Ojisu from her intelligence headquarters, "the galaxy is fighting back as one. Every species is contributing what they do best, but they're all following human strategic doctrine." "Which is?" asked Fleet Admiral Park Jinwoo. "Chaos," Ojisu replied with a smile. "Beautiful, unpredictable, utterly human chaos." The turning point came when human forces launched a coordinated assault on 17 different HFY systems simultaneously. Each attack used completely different tactics, making it impossible for the alien hive mind to develop effective countermeasures. War Prime Vextharian, still recovering from his wounds, watched his empire crumble piece by piece. Reports flooded in of lost colonies, destroyed fleets, and worst of all, defecting HFY who had chosen freedom over the security of the hive mind. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his advisors. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy. We have conquered thousands of worlds. How can these chaotic primitives be defeating us?" His chief strategist, an ancient creature called the Mind Weaver, provided an answer that chilled Vextharian to his biomechanical core. "Because they are not trying to be apex predators, War Prime. They are trying to be protectors. And a protector who fights for something they love is always more dangerous than a predator who fights for food." For the first time in his existence, War Prime Vextharian understood fear. The humans were not just defeating the HFY empire, they were transforming it, showing his people that there were ways to live that did not involve consuming everything in sight. The galaxy's greatest predators were learning what it felt like to be prey, and they were discovering that they did not like the taste of it at all. As Fleet Admiral Park Jinwoo studied reports of human victories across dozens of star systems, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The war was far from over, but for the first time since it began, humanity was winning. "Status report," he requested from his staff. 17 HFY systems liberated, 43 alien species actively supporting our forces, and over 200 HFY defectors now serving in human-led units, his aide reported. "War Prime Vextharian has retreated to the HFY Prime Cluster and is calling for reinforcements from across their empire." Park Jinwoo nodded thoughtfully. The next phase of the war would be the most dangerous yet. But humanity had proven so.